No need to bow, he insisted a euros. But the alien girl a euros trade as reason left him stunned. Captain Marcus Thorne stood at the edge of the docking platform, his boots making quiet sounds on the metal floor as the Teshrian ship settled into place. He had been to many planets, met many races, but this meeting, felt different. The Teshrians were known for their advanced technology, their strength, and their pride. But what intrigued Marcus the most was their reputation for fierce independence. The leader of this race, Princess Liara, was said to be unlike any other. She was young, beautiful, and had gained respect through her wisdom, not just her title. As the ship's doors opened and the first few Teshrians stepped out, Marcus couldn't help but feel a mix of curiosity and caution. Teshrian men and women were tall and imposing, with dark skin that shimmered faintly under the sunlight. They moved with grace as if each step was measured, and yet there was power in their movements. But the most striking thing about them was their eyes. They were different, silver, like molten metal reflecting the stars above. Princess Liara was the last to step out, and her presence alone caused a ripple of silence in the air. She was unlike anyone Marcus had ever seen. Her skin glowed with a faint lavender hue, and her eyes, bright and silver, caught the sunlight in a way that made them seem almost otherworldly. Her hair flowed like liquid platinum, and her stance was proud, yet graceful. She carried herself with the authority of someone who knew their worth. Marcus had been briefed on the Teshrians' customs, how they respected strength above all. However, he had been warned about one thing, their refusal to kneel before anyone. It was a point of pride. A matter of honor. And Marcus, being a man of high standing and pride himself, had no intention of bowing before anyone, regardless of their status. As Liara approached him, her steps confident and sure, Marcus straightened his back. The usual formalities were about to begin, but in his mind he had already decided there would be no bowing. Liara stopped before him, her silver eyes studying him, as if weighing his very soul. She spoke in a calm, clear voice, her words carrying the weight of her people's history. "You must be Captain Thorne. I have heard much about you. It is a pleasure to meet you." Marcus nodded, maintaining his composure. "The pleasure is mine, Princess Liara." "I've heard much about the Teshrians as well." The tension in the air was thick, but Marcus held his ground. As was customary in diplomatic meetings, he knew the next step would be a formal greeting, a gesture of respect. Liara's people bowed before their leaders, as did many races. But Marcus, proud and steadfast, would not bend. He straightened up even more, his voice firm. "There's no need for any formalities, Princess. No need to bow. I believe we can conduct this meeting as equals." For a moment there was silence. Liara's expression did not change, but her eyes narrowed slightly, as if pondering his words. Marcus felt a small ripple of doubt. He had expected her to show some form of resistance, perhaps a challenge to his authority. But instead she remained calm. "I see," Liara said, her voice still as steady as ever. "You refuse to bow, but allow me to offer a different perspective." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Liara's gaze softened slightly, and she took a step closer. "Where I come from, bowing is not a sign of respect. It is a sign of submission. It is an act of weakness. To bow is to accept that you are lesser, that you are beneath someone else. I would not ask you to bow, Captain, for I do not believe anyone should be beneath another." "Not even a leader?" Marcus was taken aback. He had never heard such a perspective before. He had been raised with the belief that respect was earned through power, through dominance. The idea that bowing could be seen as weakness was foreign to him. But as he looked into Liara's eyes, he saw no malice, no arrogance. Instead, there was a deep conviction. He felt a strange stirring inside him, a feeling he couldn't quite place. He had expected to meet someone who would test his resolve. But Liara had not challenged him in the way he had imagined. She had challenged his beliefs, his worldview, in a way that left him stunned. "Is that why you didn't bow?" Marcus asked, his voice quieter now, a touch of curiosity slipping through. Liara nodded slowly. "Yes. I do not bow to anyone, Captain, not even to my own people. Respect is not earned through submission. It is earned through strength, strength of mind, of character, and of will. And I believe that in time you will see that as well." Marcus stood still for a moment, processing her words. He had heard of many leaders who demanded respect through fear, through the force of their will. But Liara was different. She spoke of a different kind of strength, one that did not rely on dominance or submission. For a fleeting moment, Marcus wondered if perhaps he had been wrong all along. Perhaps there was another way to lead, another way to earn respect. But before he could delve deeper into his thoughts, Liara's voice interrupted his reflection. "I understand that you may not agree with me now," she said, "but I ask that you consider my words as we continue our talks. I do not seek to change you, Captain, only to offer a different perspective." Marcus nodded, his mind swirling with the implications of their conversation. He had come here expecting a straightforward meeting, but instead, he had found something much more profound. "We will see what the future holds, Princess," Marcus said, his voice filled with a new sense of uncertainty, but also with a curiosity he hadn't expected. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps there is more to respect than I have understood." With that, they turned and walked toward the conference room, the beginning of a new, complex relationship unfolding before them. Neither of them knew where it would lead, but one thing was certain. Their paths were now intertwined, and the journey ahead would challenge both their beliefs and their understanding of what it meant to be truly equal. The days that followed Marcus's first meeting with Princess Liara were filled with talks and preparations. There was an uneasy silence between them as they tried to figure out where they stood in this new alliance. Marcus had never encountered someone like Liara before. She was unlike any leader he had met, not just in her appearance, but in her ideas and the way she carried herself. For the first time in his career, Marcus began to question the way he had always thought about leadership. He had been taught that power was the key to respect, that strength meant control. But Liara had shown him something different. She had spoken of respect being earned through equality, through recognizing each other as equals, not through dominance. That thought lingered in Marcus's mind, even as he tried to focus on the important negotiations at hand. It was late one evening when Marcus was walking through the base, his thoughts consumed by the conversation with Liara. He found himself outside her quarters, and something urged him to step forward. Perhaps it was his curiosity, or perhaps it was a desire to understand her better. He didn't know, but as he knocked on the door, he felt an unexpected sense of anticipation. The door opened softly, revealing Liara standing in the doorway. She was dressed in simple yet elegant clothing, her dark hair flowing around her shoulders. She looked up at him with those striking silver eyes, her expression unreadable. "Captain Thorne," she said calmly, "I did not expect you." "I know," Marcus replied. I just wanted to speak with you again. I've been thinking about what you said about the way you lead, and I wanted to hear more. I think I understand what you're trying to teach me, but I don't fully grasp it yet." Liara stepped aside, allowing him to enter. She motioned for him to sit, and he did so, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over him in her presence. "I'm glad you came," she said, her voice gentle. "I believe there's much for both of us to learn, Captain, not just about each other, but about leadership itself. Sometimes the hardest thing is not to impose your will on others, but to find strength in understanding." Marcus nodded, though he still found it hard to fully accept the idea. He had always been the one to make decisions, the one who was expected to take control. It was how he had been trained, how he had been expected to act. But Liara's words had started to chip away at the walls he had built around his understanding of power. "I was raised to believe that respect comes from being in control, from leading through strength," Marcus said, his voice low. "But you don't lead that way. You lead by showing strength in ways that aren't always visible, and that confuses me." Liara smiled softly. "That's because strength is often misunderstood, Captain. Strength isn't just about making others follow you. It's about making them see you as someone worthy of respect. And that respect comes from recognizing each other's value, not by forcing others to bend to your will." "But what about in battle?" Marcus asked, feeling the need to push back. "In war, you can't just rely on understanding. You have to fight. You have to dominate." Liara's expression didn't change, but her eyes gleamed with a quiet certainty. "You're right, Captain. Sometimes battle is necessary, and sometimes dominance is required. But dominance doesn't have to be about crushing your opponent. It can be about showing them that you are strong enough to protect, to defend, not just to conquer." Marcus thought about this, his mind racing. "So it's not about making them bow." "Exactly," she said, her voice steady. "The real test of strength is not how many people you can make submit, but how many you can lift up. How many you can inspire to stand by you, not because they are forced to, but because they believe in your cause." There was a silence between them as Marcus processed her words. He had never considered this before. The idea that leadership could be about inspiring others, not forcing them, was new to him. It felt strange, almost impossible. He had always led through the weight of his authority, his position. He had assumed that respect was something you took, not something you earned. "How do you do it?" Marcus asked quietly, his curiosity getting the better of him. "How do you lead without demanding obedience?" Liara looked out the window, her gaze distant. "It's a matter of trust. I trust my people to understand the importance of what we're trying to achieve. I trust that they will see the bigger picture. And in turn, they trust me to guide them, to keep them safe, to protect what we hold dear. Trust is a two-way street, Captain. Without it, no amount of power will ever lead to true respect." Marcus let out a long breath. "I'm not sure I can change everything I've learned in an instant, but maybe you're right. Maybe there's more to leadership than I thought." Liara turned back to him, her expression softening. "I don't expect you to change overnight, Captain. This is a journey we're both on. You've been trained to think one way, and it's not easy to break free from that. But you're already starting to see the world through a different lens, and that's a good start." Marcus stood up, feeling a weight lifted off his shoulders. It wasn't as if everything was clear now, but he had taken the first step toward understanding. He wasn't sure how the future would unfold, or if he would ever fully embrace Liara's way of thinking, but he knew one thing for certain. He had never had a conversation like this before, and that was worth something. "Thank you, Princess," he said, his voice sincere, "for showing me a different way." Liara gave him a small nod, her silver eyes glinting with a quiet understanding. "The pleasure is mine, Captain. I hope you'll continue to walk this path with me, not as a leader and a follower, but as two equals working toward a common goal." Marcus didn't know what the future held, but for the first time he felt a sense of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something different. Maybe, just maybe, the Teshrians and humans could find a way to work together, not as enemies, not as subordinates, but as equals. As he left her quarters and made his way back to his room, Marcus felt the weight of his past decisions and beliefs shifting. It was a small shift, but it was enough. Enough to make him wonder if there was more to leadership than he had ever imagined. The next morning, Marcus stood on the balcony of his quarters, looking out at the horizon. The planet's twin suns were just beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the desert landscape. He had a lot of work to do, a lot of decisions to make. But for the first time in a long while, he felt ready. As the days passed, Marcus found himself thinking more and more about what Liara had said. The idea of leadership based on mutual respect and trust, rather than power and control, had started to take root in his mind. He couldn't deny that it was a refreshing way of looking at things, but it also felt like an uphill battle. He had spent his whole life believing that leadership meant being in control, making tough decisions that others might not like but had to follow. It was hard to let go of that mindset. Yet every time he saw Liara, it became clearer that she didn't just talk about these ideals, she lived them. She had shown him how her people respected her, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it through her actions, her wisdom, and her fairness. The Teshrians were a proud people, but their respect for Liara was not because she forced it upon them. It was because she treated them as equals, each with their value. Marcus had learned so much in the past few days. But he also knew that learning something new was easier than changing how you lived. And as much as he wanted to change, he wasn't sure he was ready to abandon everything he had been taught. It would take time. But one thing he did know was that he couldn't ignore what Liara had shown him. It was the morning of the next important meeting. The peace talks were coming to a head, and the future of the alliance between the Teshrians and the humans depended on how this conversation went. Marcus had been briefed about the details, but his mind was not focused on the negotiations. It was focused on Liara's words and how much they had begun to shape his view of what was truly important. He walked into the conference room, his thoughts still clouded with questions about his own leadership. As he entered, he saw Liara standing by the window, looking out at the vast desert landscape. The way she carried herself, so calm, so composed, made him wonder if he could ever be that way. He had always been on edge, always ready to fight for control. But Liara, she was different. She turned when she heard him enter, and her silver eyes locked onto his. For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the room. The tension between them was not one of hostility, but of something deeper, a recognition that they were both on the edge of something new. "Captain," she greeted him, her voice smooth and steady. "Princess," he replied, offering a small nod. "I've been thinking about what you said, about leadership, about respect." Liara's expression softened, and she nodded. I'm glad to hear that, Captain. It takes strength to reconsider the way you've always thought. Marcus gave a small smile. I'm not there yet, but I'm willing to try. They took their seats and the meeting began. As the talks progressed, Marcus found himself listening more carefully than he ever had before. He had always been the one to take charge, to dominate the conversation. But today, he listened. He listened to Liara, to her people, and to the human representatives who had come with him. It wasn't easy at first. Old habits were hard to break. But the more he listened, the more he understood the importance of hearing others' perspectives. As Liara spoke, Marcus couldn't help but admire her. She spoke with authority, but not in the way he was used to. It wasn't about raising her voice or making threats. It was about speaking clearly, with conviction, but also with a sense of openness. She didn't see herself as above anyone else in the room, even though she could have easily claimed that position. Instead, she treated everyone with respect. She made them feel like their opinions mattered, and slowly Marcus began to see the power in that approach. It wasn't about forcing people to follow you, it was about earning their respect, not through dominance but through understanding. Liara had done that effortlessly. She had shown him that leadership wasn't about making people bow, it was about lifting them up. By the time the meeting ended, Marcus was exhausted, but in a good way. He had learned more in those few hours than he had in years of formal training, and the talks had gone well. The humans and the Teshrians had reached an agreement that would pave the way for a lasting alliance. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As the group began to disperse, Liara stayed behind. She walked over to Marcus, her expression serious but kind. You did well today, she said quietly. You listened, that's the first step. Marcus looked at her, feeling a sense of gratitude he hadn't expected. I couldn't have done it without you, Princess. You've opened my eyes to something I didn't see before. Liara smiled, a warm, knowing smile. It's not about what I've shown you, Captain, it's about what you've shown yourself. You've already taken the first step. The rest will come with time. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. It was a strange feeling to know that change was happening inside of him. He wasn't sure how far he had come yet, but he knew he wasn't the same man who had walked into this room days ago. As the day drew to a close, Marcus found himself standing outside, looking up at the two suns setting over the desert. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the air was cool. It felt like a new beginning, not just for the Teshrians and humans, but for him as well. He wasn't sure what the future held. There were still many challenges ahead, but for the first time he felt hopeful. He had learned that leadership wasn't about being the strongest or the most dominant. It was about being strong enough to understand others, to listen, and to work together. That was the kind of leader he wanted to be. As he turned to head back to his quarters, he realized that this journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, he was ready to walk it, not alone, but side by side with those who would help him become the leader he knew he could be. The days after the successful peace talks passed quickly. The Teshrians and humans had signed the agreement, and there was an air of optimism in the base. Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. The alliance, although young, was a symbol of something bigger. A new way of thinking, a way that didn't rely on domination or submission, but on mutual respect. But as the peace talks moved into the next phase, Marcus knew that the true test of the alliance would be in its execution. It wasn't enough to sign a treaty. They had to work together, understand each other, and face challenges side by side. That was the real test. One evening, as Marcus sat in his quarters reviewing the details of the treaty, there was a knock on his door. He stood up, curious. It was rare for anyone to come by at this hour. When he opened the door, he was surprised to find Liara standing there, her silver eyes shining in the dim light. "Princess," Marcus said, surprised but pleased, "what brings you here?" "I wanted to speak with you," she replied, "about the next steps in our alliance." "There's much to discuss." Marcus stepped aside to let her in. They had spoken a few times since the peace talks, but this was different. There was a sense of urgency in her voice that he couldn't ignore. He could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes, just as he had begun to feel it in himself. "I've been thinking about our future," Liara began, as they sat down at the small table in his quarters, "and about what we must do to ensure this alliance lasts. We need more than just a treaty. We need trust, understanding, and most of all, cooperation." Marcus nodded, his mind already running through the potential challenges. It wasn't going to be easy. Different cultures, different histories, different ways of doing things, there was so much that could go wrong. But he had come to trust Liara's judgment. She wasn't just a leader, she was someone who truly believed in what they were doing. And for the first time, Marcus found himself believing in it too. I agree, he said, but where do we start? Liara's gaze softened and she smiled slightly. The first step is simple. We need to show our people that this isn't just about us, it's about them. It's about creating something that will benefit everyone. Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering her words. It made sense. The people of both the Teschrian and human worlds would have to see the benefits of this alliance, not just hear about it from their leaders. They needed to see the results of cooperation, to feel the difference it made in their daily lives. I think I understand, Marcus said. We have to build something that shows the value of working together, but what exactly do you propose? Liara's eyes gleamed with determination. We start by working on something that both our people can see and feel, something tangible, a project that brings us together. Marcus's curiosity grew. What kind of project? A joint mission, Liara said. Something that will require both of our strengths, something that will show that when we work together we are stronger than we could ever be apart. Marcus thought about this for a moment. A joint mission. It was a good idea, but what could they possibly do that would be meaningful enough for both species? Then it hit him. Exploration, he said, almost to himself. We could send an expedition to a nearby galaxy, a place neither of us has explored. We'd learn from each other. Discover new resources, and the people back home would see the results of our cooperation firsthand. Liara smiled, her eyes lighting up. Exactly. We share our knowledge, our technology, and our strengths. We show our people that this alliance isn't just about politics or treaties, it's about building a future together. Marcus felt a spark of excitement. It was a huge undertaking, but it felt right. This was the kind of mission that could unite both their worlds. It wasn't about conquering new lands or gaining control over resources. It was about learning, growing, and building something together. I like it, Marcus said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. But there's one thing I need to ask. Are you sure your people will go along with this? They don't have a history of trusting humans. Liara nodded. I believe they will, but it will take time. They will need to see that we are serious, that we are committed to this alliance, and they need to trust you, Captain. Not just as a leader, but as someone who believes in what we are doing. Marcus sighed, feeling the weight of her words. I've never been good at making people trust me. I've always relied on authority, on strength. But this is different. I don't want to lead through fear anymore. I want to lead through respect. Liara reached across the table, her hand resting gently on his. That's why I believe in you, Captain. You're already changing, and your people will see that. They'll follow you not because they have to, but because they will believe in you. For the first time, Marcus felt a sense of hope. The journey ahead was uncertain, and there would be challenges. But with Liara by his side, he knew they could overcome anything. Together, they could show their people that the future didn't have to be about dominance and control. It could be about respect, unity, and shared purpose. We'll make it work, Marcus said, his voice filled with determination. We'll prove that this alliance is more than just a treaty. We'll show them that together we can build something that lasts. Liara's smile widened. I believe in you, Captain, and I believe in us. As the meeting came to a close, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had always thought that leadership was about being the strongest, the most authoritative. But now, he saw that leadership was about building something bigger than yourself. It was about inspiring others, earning their trust, and working together toward a common goal. The joint mission to explore new frontiers was just the beginning. There would be many more challenges ahead. But for the first time, Marcus felt ready to face them. Not alone, but with Liara and the Teschrians by his side. And as the days passed and the plans for the mission began to take shape, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. This was the future he had always wanted, a future built on cooperation, respect, and trust. And together, he and Liara would lead their people into it. The preparations for the joint mission were underway, and the energy at the base had shifted. What had once felt like a tense, uncertain alliance was now filled with a shared sense of purpose. The humans and Teschrians were coming together, united by the idea that exploration, learning, and cooperation could create something better than either side could achieve alone. Marcus stood at the command center, looking over the plans for the expedition. The project was ambitious, and there were many hurdles to overcome. But the excitement that had been building for weeks was finally turning into action. The team was being assembled, and both humans and Teschrians would work side by side on this mission. It was the first real test of the partnership they had forged, and Marcus could feel the weight of it. Liara joined him, her presence always steadying, always clear. She had been an incredible ally in this mission, showing Marcus how to approach leadership in a way that was completely foreign to him. She was patient, understanding, and deeply committed to the idea that this alliance would succeed, not just for the benefit of their people, but for the future of both races. "Are we ready?" Marcus asked as she approached him. His voice was calm, but there was a trace of nervousness in his eyes. The mission was about to begin, and he couldn't help but feel the pressure. Liara smiled, her silver eyes shining with a quiet confidence. "We are as ready as we can be. Our people are excited. They see the value of this mission, and they believe in what we are doing." Marcus nodded, though a part of him still wasn't fully convinced. He had led many missions in his time, but this one felt different. This was not about asserting control or showing strength. It was about sharing knowledge, building relationships, and proving that they could work together. There was so much at stake, and Marcus wasn't sure if the success of the mission would be enough to convince the others that their alliance was real. But Liara's faith in him gave him hope. "I've been thinking about everything you said," Marcus began. "About strength, respect, and what it means to be a leader. I'm still not sure I've fully figured it out, but I know that I can't do this alone. I need to rely on others, on you, and on the people around us. We all need to be in this together." Liara placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch reassuring. "That's the right mindset, Captain. Leadership isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about guiding others, trusting them, and showing them the way. You've already learned more than you realize." Marcus gave her a small, appreciative smile. He still wasn't sure he was ready to be the kind of leader she was, but he was starting to understand what it meant. Leadership wasn't about control. It was about collaboration, trust, and shared goals. And that's what he was learning to build with Liara and the Teschrians. The countdown to the launch had begun, and the entire base was buzzing with activity. Crews were finishing up their preparations, finalizing the mission plans, and ensuring that everything was in place. Marcus and Liara moved through the base together, overseeing the final details. There was an electricity in the air, a sense of excitement that reminded Marcus of the early days of his career, before everything had become so complicated. As they reached the launch platform, Marcus paused to look out at the ships that were lined up, ready to depart. The humans and Teschrians would be traveling together, exploring a region of space that neither species had ever set foot in. The unknown stretched out before them, and the possibilities seemed endless. "This is it," Marcus said softly. "This is the beginning of something new." Liara nodded. "Yes, it's just the beginning, but it's the beginning of something great." The mission's captain, a seasoned Teschrian named Kasha, approached them, her face set with determination. Kasha had been one of the first to accept the idea of the alliance, and she had quickly earned Marcus's respect. She was a warrior, a leader, but also someone who understood the value of cooperation. "Captain Thorn, Princess Liara," Kasha said with a nod. "We are ready for departure. The crews are in position. The ship is prepped." "Good," Marcus replied, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline. "Let's get this started." Liara turned to Kasha. "We go as one, not as two separate forces. We share this journey equally." Kasha's eyes softened, and she bowed her head slightly. "Understood, Princess. Together we will succeed." The moment of departure was upon them. Marcus climbed aboard the human ship, and Liara followed, her calm presence a steadying force beside him. The Teschrians boarded their own ship, which would travel alongside the human vessel. They were all part of one mission, one team. There were no divisions, no separate agendas, just a shared purpose. As the ships lifted off from the platform and soared into the sky, Marcus felt a sense of awe. It was a simple act, leaving the ground, traveling into the unknown, but for him it was a symbol of something much greater. It was a new way of thinking, a new way of leading. It was proof that, despite all the differences between their two species, they could come together for something greater than themselves. The journey ahead was filled with uncertainty, but Marcus was no longer afraid of it. He had learned that fear could be overcome by trust. He trusted Liara, he trusted the Teschrians, and he was beginning to trust himself in a way he never had before. The first days of the journey were filled with discovery. The human and Testrian crews worked together seamlessly, sharing their knowledge and skills. The ship systems were integrated smoothly, and the crew began to bond. They shared stories, laughed, and learned from each other. The differences that had once seemed so large now felt insignificant. They were united in a way that Marcus had never experienced before. As they traveled through the vast reaches of space, Marcus found himself thinking about his journey as a leader. He had come a long way from the man who had first met Liara, a man who believed that strength meant dominance. He had learned that true strength came from understanding, from respecting others, and from working together. And as they traveled deeper into the unknown, he knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But together they would face them. By the time they reached their destination, Marcus was a changed man. The mission had been a success, and the alliance had proven itself strong. But more importantly, Marcus had learned the most important lesson of all. Leadership wasn't about being the strongest. It was about lifting others up, guiding them, and working together to build something greater than any one person could accomplish alone. As they returned to their respective worlds, Marcus and Liara stood side by side, looking out at the future they had begun to create. They were no longer two separate forces. They were allies, partners, equals. And together, they had proven that anything was possible when they worked as one.